Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, Senior Contributing Editor, and I will be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Google for Education. Today's webinar is truly global. Both of our speakers are in Australia, and I want to thank attendees in the eastern part of the U.S. particularly for making time this evening for this presentation. It's titled, Going Google Across the Globe. How McKinnon Secondary College is helping set the pace for EdTech in Australia. Before I introduce our two speakers, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded, and in a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation. And second, please do ask questions, and don't feel as if you have to wait until the end to do so. Anytime during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I hope that we'll have maybe 15 minutes or so at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We do have a chat function which can be launched via the brown group chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or other concerns. But please don't use it to ask the panelists questions. They probably won't have time to monitor the chat. Instead, if you want to ask a question, use the Q&A panel instead. With that out of the way, let's turn to today's speakers. Adam Nair is an education specialist at Google. As head of the Chrome and Education team for the Asia-Pacific region, he helps schools across Australia and New Zealand harness web-based instruction and adopt web-based tools. He's been involved in educational technology at Google for 4 years, and today he comes to us from Sydney. Our second speaker, Blake Seufert, is the Systems Manager at McKinnon Secondary College in Melbourne and co-host of the Using Technology Better show. Blake has helped countless schools get the most out of their technology and focuses on delivering knowledge, technology, and training that supports great outcomes for learning. Welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Adam, why don't you lead us off?
Great. First of all, can you see the slides okay, and can you hear me well?
Yes, we can. I think everything looks good.
That's a yes. Great. All right. So thank you again for the kind introduction and for everyone joining this webinar today. We're going to cover a variety of capacities of what Google is doing in education and how that's transforming the lives of students in the classroom. It's something we're very passionate about, and we're excited to share that enthusiasm with you. At Google, we think a lot about numbers. And the first number we think about in the context of education is 60%. And we think a lot about this number because it represents something that's extremely important for students as well as for teachers. 60%, if you think about what that number represents, is the percentage of students currently in school today whose future careers do not yet exist. It's a very, very powerful thing to think about. Most of the jobs that students in your classroom will have when they go beyond the parameters of your school site, they will enter a workforce and a career in jobs and in lines of work that don't exist. So while we can't predict the future, what we can believe and what we do think is possible is that technology will play a central role in how people learn and communicate and share and get stuff done. So we want to prepare students for jobs that don't exist and for ways of thinking that are in development. And at Google, we're doing this through the creation of technology that's open, that's powerful, that's scalable, and that can be used to help improve access to learning for every student everywhere around the world. We think that's extremely important. When we think about the different buckets of behavior with technology, and in particular learning outcomes, and what it means to go Google or adopt Google technology in the classroom or at a school site, we think about it in terms of different modes of behavior. The first is around empowerment. What does it mean to help students and teachers discover a world of infinite resources? If you think about what the internet is, essentially it's a repository of information that's expanding. It's like a database that's consistently growing. How do we leverage the tools and knowledge that exists online today to make our lives better? to find information that's more timely and useful. The second bucket is around choice. What does it mean to use the right device for the right learning situation and outcome, anytime, anywhere? How do we empower students to use the right piece of hardware and software to improve their learning outcomes and their learning processes? The third is around teamwork. What does it mean to work together in real time? What does it mean to collaborate in real time, to learn together, to facilitate creative learning processes? How can we do that? How can we harness the leverage and understanding of different students to work together to achieve better learning outcomes? And the fourth is scalability. What does it mean to implement and deploy technology that's affordable, that's easy to manage, that can be well received by students and ICT folks as well as teachers? So if we can get this right across empowering students, giving them the right choice, facilitating teamwork, and doing this at scale so that it's aligned with budgets and the needs of schools, we think that we'll create a solution that's extremely powerful. When we think about access to digital content, when we think about the applications that people need to use, when we think about what resources students need, we think about web apps, we think about Android apps, we think about digital content that empowers students and teachers, depending on what they're learning, to have it be easily accessed and aligned with their curriculum goals. And that's another big area of focus for our team. And then, of course, on the device side, students and teachers can use Google Apps across multiple devices, anytime, anywhere, whether it's a Chromebook or an Android tablet or a PC or a netbook or a smartphone, to be able to access your information, your documents, your research, your team-facilitated learning is extremely powerful. Ideally, the technology becomes invisible. No one says, is this a good pen or is this a bad pen? They just say it's a pen, and a pen everyone knows is used for writing. We want technology to be the same way in the classroom. And by creating great content and great devices and a great open platform, we want to move in that direction, and we have.
Hello.
One of the challenges that, hello?
Hi, Adam. Sorry, it's Blake.
But Blake, we're in the middle of the presentation here.
No problem. Sorry about that.
No worries. That's Blake. He'll be presenting later. One of the challenges about deploying worthwhile solutions to students is how do you manage devices at scale? We all know that rolling out technology in the classroom is complicated. It can be expensive. It can require teachers who are already busy to have to wear multiple hats and figure out more complex technology needs than just focusing on their students. And one of the things Blake will discuss is how his school, which is here in Australia, manages many, many Chromebooks and can do so relatively easily. I think back to the times when I was a student, and I had a number of teachers that really impacted the ways I thought about the world and the books that inspired me. And had they had to have spent less time focusing on me as a student and spent more time dealing with ICT complexity or pain points or which computers were updated and which ones weren't, that would have created a worse educational outcome for myself. And we are now well positioned to build technology and provide it to schools that solves that problem, that enables teachers to focus on what got them into education in the first place, which is helping students learn. So we'll talk about managing devices easily and effortlessly so students can get up and running, focus on their teamwork, their creative learning processes, their outcomes for educational attainment, and how to do so very easily. So within the broader platforms that Google provides to schools, you have Google Apps for Education. And this is something that many schools use because it's free, it's easy to use, and it facilitates teamwork. The second is around devices. Many schools are using Chromebooks or Android tablets in a variety of capacities, either for helping students get online or for a low-cost computing solution for students to do their work, etc. And then the last open technology that we're working on is around content. The internet, this great repository of information, is only as useful as the tools that can be leveraged from the internet to help students learn on the topics that they need to focus on. And so we're working with third-party software vendors and providers to build great content, to really bring the web to life in the classroom. For those of you who are not familiar with what the Google Apps for Education core suite of services includes, this is the slide that provides you sort of a nice visual layout of that. You have Google Drive, which is the repository for Google Documents and spreadsheets and presentations. It's a big repository, basically, where you can put all of your students' work and they can manage it and create content. You have a calendar. Of course, you have email. Then you have Google Groups. You can put students into groups based on age level or class or subject, et cetera, and customize it. And then, of course, Google Sites. So you can build websites internally. Your students can start building websites, or you can build sites to manage different aspects of your school. So that's all provided for schools. And, of course, it's a very well-adopted product. It's very widely used. There's roughly 40 million active users of this from students around the world. And here are a number of sort of the marquee labels. This includes many of the top universities in America. It includes, here in Australia, many of the big educational accounts in terms of state departments of education, and many, many others. So depending on where you're dialing in from, there's local examples of schools, government institutions, educational bodies, universities, et cetera, that have deployed this to their faculty and their staff and their students. And of course, in addition to being a very powerful, very compelling tool, and one that's widely adopted, it's also free, which from an ICT perspective makes it sort of very democratic in nature. It can be ubiquitous, it can be useful, and it can come at no cost. And this is something that schools find particularly compelling in an environment where it's important to mitigate costs for ICT. This is an amazing platform where you can outsource your servers essentially to Google to do the computing needs and maintenance and management that you might have to do if you did it in-house otherwise, and to provide these tools for your students. So if we think about what that first platform represents, it's free, it's easy to use, it's well adopted across the world by many marquee different educational bodies, big and small, and it's also something that is a powerful platform. Every student gets a username and password, sort of like a Gmail ID, and then from there they can unlock the power of Google Docs and spreadsheets and collaboration, etc. Well, if a school is using that as a platform, then a low-cost, very easy to use computer by which they can access that information is called the Chromebook. Now, maybe you've heard about the Chromebook doing very well in schools. It's a very compelling product. It makes a lot of sense. Or maybe you've seen it at a local retailer or store coming up for the holiday season. In any capacity, the Chromebook represents a model of computing that's extremely powerful because it's very, very easy to use. It's intuitive. It's easy to manage. And I'm going to talk about what some of those features actually represent. When I started working on the education team at Google over 4 years ago, I remember when we brought in ICT leaders and principals and educators to Google's headquarters in Mountain View and asked them what is going well with computers in the classroom and what's not. And the feedback we got was pretty consistent across the board, whether it was from a teacher or an IT person or a principal or a superintendent. It went something like this, and I'm paraphrasing. Devices were too slow. Computers were too expensive, they were too hard to manage, and then they got in the way of learning in the classroom. And so what we were told is if you could solve one or two of these, that would be a great help. And at Google we thought, well, what if we could use technology to solve all of these problems in one fell swoop? And that's what we've done. The Chromebook represents a computer that's just faster than any other device. It goes from off to on in under 10 seconds. It creates a ubiquitous and uniform experience across the board so that every computer, regardless of who opens it up, behaves the same. So you don't have some students that have a machine that takes 30 seconds to start and another that starts in 4 minutes or 12 minutes or doesn't start at all. There's no viruses. There's not some computers that will have pop-ups or antivirus software, malware bloating the screen and getting in the way of learning. It's the same experience. And because all you need to do is use your Google Apps credentials to log into it, it's very easy to share and it's secure. And because we built this product in conjunction with schools, it's been very well received by schools. It makes a lot of sense. And Blake will talk about why his school decided to use Chromebooks, because these benefits around easy computing, simple computing, fast computing make a lot of difference to the folks that matter most in education, and that's the students. And of course, there's a multiple range of devices that schools have chosen from, depending on the specs that they desire around bigger screens or bigger batteries or lower price points, etc. We have many choices that schools can use and deploy. The last aspect of Chromebooks that schools told us, hey, this is just too darn complicated for us with the old model of computing. They said, computers are too slow, and they get viruses, and they get worse with time, and they get in the way of learning. Those were all attributes tied to the operating system and the hardware. One of the really marquee pieces of feedback we got was that it was just too hard to manage computers in the classroom. It was too hard for teachers to know what students were doing. It was too hard for IT directors to manage and push out updates to computers. It was too hard for principals to know exactly how the fleet of machines in their school is being used. Now, I often think about the metaphor of a car. If you own a car and you buy it, it's great on day one. And then you drive it around town and start to use it, and it starts to depreciate, and it starts to become, it has issues with time. Wouldn't it be nice if you could park your car in front of your house, go have dinner with your family, go to sleep, and come back the next day, and the car had updated its own tire pressure and changed its own oil and revved its own engine? Now, of course, that'd be great. And everyone that has had a car that has had troubles and had to have left it at the mechanics for a day or two knows that it'd be wonderful if a car could fix itself or improve itself. Well, wouldn't that be great with computers also? You think about why people get into education. It's to help students learn. It's to build better communities. It's to inspire folks, not to manage ICT and IT complexities in the classroom. I have yet to meet a teacher in my time at Google who got into teaching because they wanted to update computers and reimage them during the summer and install software computer by computer by computer. So what we've done is we've built a computer that not only is easy to use, not only works immediately, not only doesn't get viruses, but is also very easy to manage and updates itself. So it's forever fresh, it's always up to date, and it takes that part of complexity, that part of thinking about computers out of the equation so that folks can focus on educational outcomes in the classroom. I think of all the initiatives I've been involved with at Google and all of the initiatives we've been involved in education, this is the one I'm most proud of, because if we can empower people to focus on students and focus on learning outcomes, they will be able to do a better job. And by enabling us to focus on the complexities and challenges of technology, we can improve people's lives and ensure better outcomes in the classroom. The last part of our portfolio of technology, you have Google Apps for Education, which of course is free, easy to use, many folks are using it. You have Chromebooks, which becomes a device, sort of an endpoint by which to access the broader power of the internet in a managed and safe environment that updates itself and is very compelling for that reason. And the last is a new Google product that was just launched a few months ago called Classroom, which enables teachers to manage the repository of information that their students create effortlessly and easily in one single sort of learning management system user interface. If you combine these different buckets with things like the content that we are helping create in our app stores, with our OEM partners to build great hardware, with the fact that these devices like Google Docs constantly getting updated, constantly getting better, you have a full end-to-end solution of technology in the classroom that can help people learn, can simplify the lives of the adults running the schools, and can improve educational outcomes. That is what our mission is. That's what we're focused on, and that's what these technologies enable us to do. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the Google part of this presentation. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Blake Seufert, who joined the call, and he's going to talk about his school's decision to use these technologies and what they're doing, et cetera. And then at the end of that, together in aggregate, we're going to do Q&A, and I'm very excited to hear your questions. Thank you very much for listening to the first part of the presentation. Blake, over to you, mate.
Thank you very much, Adam, and my apologies for interrupting you there in the midstream of your presentation. I think you've done an excellent job there, sort of wrapping up, I guess, the the overview of Google Apps and the clear advantages that certainly we've seen here at McKinnon Secondary College. So my name's Blake Seifert. I'm from Australia, as you can tell with my accent, but I'm the systems manager here at McKinnon Secondary College. We're a years 7 to 12 sort of senior college that encompasses about 2,000 students and 150 staff. We've been traditionally sort of schools very open to different technologies. But when I arrived here 8 years ago, it was a very different story. We were a very traditional school. We used pen and paper a lot, and one of the things that we wanted to change was this notion of using technology in the classroom, but we really were laser focused on getting benefits out of it, and we struggled with that for a number of years using PCs and Macs and various things around the school whereby we were spending so much time and effort in the administration of the devices and in the administration of the platforms. It just seemed a bit unequitable to be spending that amount of money when you looked at the sort of flip side of that, which is the student learning and them getting their benefits out of it. So just before I go ahead and sort of launch right into this stuff, I'll be sharing a number of resources inside this presentation, so there will be little links in there. I believe you'll be able to rewatch this, and at the very end I'll give you the link to actually grab this presentation that I'm presenting to you right now. So if you miss anything, don't worry too much. There'll be an opportunity at the end to grab it. So yeah, that was the basics of it. That was about a year ago. We had 1,800. Now since then we've raised the bar a little bit. We have over 2,000 computers now. From what we used to have, we have 750 Chromebooks at the start of this year, and I'll definitely speak to that a little bit later in the presentation. So to give you an idea of our journey, I suppose, and where we started way back in 2010 when Google Apps was just coming out of the States. We needed to move our email provider. We sort of got stuck in a way. Our email provider at the time was just a webmail provider. They were losing the contract to provide to government schools in Australia. And we picked that up in January 2010 and said, okay, well, we'll go with Google Apps. It was newly available. We were all using it internally anyway. We were using Gmail and Google Docs internally in the IT department. So we thought, let's give this a go. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions we ever made. And the way we sort of introduced it to staff was we went, okay, well, let's just replace our email. But very quickly we started realizing there's a lot more potential here. There's a lot more stuff that can be done with it. And so we started turning things on, and this is sort of the process in which we ran through everything. First, starting with Gmail, so turning on the email, then we went to calendar. We actually moved our whole school calendar within 6 months. That's how sort of meteoric the change was. The whole school calendar ran off Google Calendar within 6 months, and then we saw this other thing, Google Docs, and we thought this is fantastic. Live collaboration. We can have kids editing one doc at the same time, and we can have staff working on the same document rather than emailing around their curriculum documentation. So immediately we saw the benefits of that, and I think Adam spoke very well to that point of just simplifying things at the sort of school level, I guess. So we turned Docs on, then we got into Google Sites, which were fantastic for us. We just turned those on. We didn't provide any training, and staff picked those up and ran with them so quickly that we realized we were really onto something here. So I'll show you some examples of that a little bit later and how they're sort of getting used together. And then we started turning on the rest of the suite, so Google Groups. Initially we had trepidation about Hangouts, which is chat between students, but we found once we turned that on, kids were using that for collaboration. They were using that to communicate with teachers. We've recently, in the last sort of 6 months, turned on Google Plus for all our students, and that's been really interesting to watch how teachers are using it, and we've got a few little examples of that a bit later on as well. And then I'll talk to Chromebooks at the end, and how we've implemented those and what successes we've had, and sort of what failures and barriers we've had with them as well. And there's a timeline of all of this if anyone wants to grab it at the end, which will be like a little infographic. There's a link there, but the link will be at the end of the presentation. So how we use Google Apps. If I start with Google Docs, and we'll go through all these various forms of it. Docs is probably the best place to start. We have a tremendous uptake with Google Apps. We've had it for quite some time, so we've had it since 2010. So we've had a long time to kind of gestate on that, I guess. And one of the things that we've found really powerful is this online collaboration, and it's available in all the Google Docs. So this is an example of a presentation created in Google Slides, whereby the teacher will actually be invited into this document at its very creation, and they can watch the process of the document being created, rather than sort of setting an assignment and getting an end product whereby no coaching can go on. Now suddenly they're able to coach all the way along the creation of the document, so that they get the result they want as a teacher. You know, they're able to direct the student to the result that they're looking for, but also the student has the opportunity to ask questions and get feedback as the work's being created. So from that point of view, it's really changed a lot of the pedagogy in the classroom and how teachers are using it. So that's kind of one example of just a presentation that they're using. You can see on this presentation there's a video embedded in there. That's just a video this student's put on his Google Drive, I believe, or YouTube. And that's a little video wrap-up of the presentation. I think the presentation was about magnetic radiation affecting the growth of plants or something like that. And this is a Year 7 student. You know, he's got photos in there, he's got video, little summaries, investigation work. Pretty impressive. I'm not sure I would have been capable of that at Year 7. So it's sort of raising the bar in a way, I think, with what students can produce. So there's a whole raft of other things we'll do with Google Docs, and also spreadsheets. Our maths department use spreadsheets, and also accounting in Year 11. And that's fantastic as well, because it's that same thing. They can be commented on, they can be collaborating on this one document, and they can also invite other students to collaborate, or the teachers directly. But one of the things that we're sort of exploring now, once we've gotten used to Google Apps and used to its potential, is these third-party plugins. And this is where Google kind of breaks away from its competition in terms of what you can do with a Google document. So here we have an example of Kaizena, which is a plugin for Google Apps, basically a third-party plugin, and it's a third-party company that run this, and they allow you to give voice comments. So it seems like a fairly straightforward thing. You know, you highlight some text and you give a voice comment. But some of our teachers have just found this to be transformational, especially for kids that are falling behind or struggling to understand feedback that's given when it's written, but also to make the kids sort of stop and think. The voice comments were really interesting, where normally they'd say, hey, why don't you try and phrase this sentence like this, and the student would just copy it and paste it straight into their text and never really think about it and move on. Whereas with the voice comment, it's forcing them to stop and listen and make a judgment about what the teacher's feedback is, and then act on that feedback. And it's a totally different mindset. So really interesting stuff around the third-party apps and the advantages that can come out of that. And the best stuff will rise to the top there. So we're not just locked into what Google want to set, what their agenda is and what they want to give to us. It was also that openness that Google brings with its platform that allows us to go into other areas and see, different skews on how we can provide feedback or do a certain task inside of Google Drive. So the next sort of document that I'll show you has totally changed how we do almost all the administration in the college, which is Google Forms. And for those of you who aren't aware of what that is, it's very simply a survey or a quiz that you can set up. Add questions in, you can do multiple choice, free text answer, you can do time, duration. There's a whole range of different question types. And it's a really simple way to get information either off students and off staff as well. So we do surveying in the IT department about the perception of IT in the school. We do surveying of students about how they're finding using IT and various things like that. We also do, teachers, we do PD around this, so teachers can quickly survey and pre-test their students. And again, there's these third-party plugins that will let you auto-mark a form or a quiz that you've sent to your students. It'll auto-grade it, send them the feedback immediately, all without the teacher even needing to lift a finger. So kind of transformational in terms of productivity and time management. Something that would have taken you hours to do now does automatically. You set it up once and it takes you maybe 10 minutes to set it up. And a lot of people are taking their existing worksheets, their existing tests, and then kind of just forming them up in this format and easily getting it out to the students. I mean, We have class codes set up. We just send it straight to the Year 7 maths class. Each student gets this directly in their email box, fills it out immediately. It might be 10-question pretest, goes straight back to the teacher. The teacher can decide what to do with that. And some teachers have that automatic response that I was talking about that immediately gives the feedback to the students. So really, change the way we do everything, and especially in administration. Trying to collect grades off all the Year 9 teachers, for instance. They just send out one form and it's done, rather than a pigeonhole drop and sending out emails and documents and just tons of stuff. It's very, very streamlined now. So that's been a huge boon for us, and especially from the administration. The principal class love it because they're able to get the information they need. And this is an example of a survey we've sent out, just one of the many, just around Hapara, how often people are using it. Hapara is another third party that plugs into Google Apps. And we wanted to collect some data on this, and we pay for it, so we want to make sure we're getting our value for money and that it's getting used. And it just gives you this instant feedback, and you can see straight away, okay, I know where we're at now with it. I can see that Smart Copy, one of the features of Hapara, is getting used a lot or a little, or it draws all these nice graphs for you. So moving on now to sites. So that was sort of Google Docs and Google Drive, which incorporates what Adam was talking about, that productivity suite of documents and spreadsheets, slides, forms, and obviously Google Drive is also like a Dropbox as well, so you can put up any sort of file there and share that with your kids, whether that's a Photoshop file or whatever it might be. And just changing gears now into Google Sites. And Google Sites are sort of like your mini, I guess, place on the web. And this was something that really resonated with our teaching staff. So we didn't, like I said earlier, when we introduced Sites, we'd had Drive around for a while. Some people were using it, some people weren't. We introduced Sites, and that changed everything for us. It really just lit a fire underneath what we were already doing and just exploded it. And part of the success of that was the ease of use with it. People could get a website up and running with all their resources on it, with their course outline and whatever it might be for their students to go and access when they wanted to, on their terms, giving that freedom back to the students. And they were able to do that very quickly. So create this website in maybe less than an hour with all your resources on it. And they didn't have to convert their old stuff. If they had things in Word or PowerPoint, they just attach those. Google Drive takes care of the viewing of that for you. And what we started to see was these popping up everywhere. We turned it on and gave it to a few staff and said, hey, we've turned it on, go for it. And before we knew it, almost every staff member in the school had a Google site. And that's refreshing for us, rather than having to kind of run all this PD and push all this stuff. We started noticing that the best stuff will just bubble to the top. And when you have such a great tool set and you provide the training, once teachers find something that works for them, it bubbles to the top, and then we do everything that we can to kind of support that. So Google Sites, this is an example of a typical site you would see for a class. This is one for the Year 12 business class. There's just some resources on there, some other information around the Year 12 business management class, further reading, course materials, all that sort of stuff will go in there. But there's also other ways that staff are using and students are using these sites. One way is our science fair. We used to run a night here where all the parents would arrive, and we'd put on a big event in the hall and do this big science fair. And what we found was often parents are busy, they couldn't attend. There's a lot of stress involved in that. So we decided to make it virtual and make a Google site that's public. By default, the sites are only private. They're internal. You have to invite people into them. But this website was set up by our Year 7 science teacher, and she decided, let's make this public and do a virtual science tour. So each student gets their own page, and this is that student's page you saw before, that same assignment that he's been working on. That assignment was for this science fair website. So immediately, the page is created for all the students. She can set that up fairly quickly. And then in that page, she embeds their presentation. And what she does with that is she says, okay, we're going to put your presentation into this site before you've finished it, when you've started it. And that lets her just go through each page each week and check out their presentations, where they're up to with them, provide them with a little bit of feedback, correct their course a little bit. And like I said, that's really changed the way we sort of approach teaching with technology. And here, once they're finished, we're able to put this site live, public on the web, Anyone can see it while the science fair is going on. And that allowed a lot of parents to get in when it suited them, to have a look at their kids' work, have a look at other kids' work as well. I mean, you talk about authentic audience, having all these parents in there looking at, your son's mates' work and comparing it to their sons and all that sort of stuff was really interesting. So a great experiment, and the big question I get about that is, well, what about the privacy and, having student work out there? Well, we handled it in the same way we would an excursion. We said, your student's work's going to be live on the internet. Do you consent to that? And we haven't had a parent say no yet. So that's sort of where we are at with that one. But that's a really creative use of sites. And again, that's not something we've prompted. That's been driven out of the teachers knowing the tools are there, having the knowledge of the tools and what can be done with them, and then moving forward. So this was just a little aside to that that I thought is a really interesting observation around Google Apps and how easy it is to use, which is around Google Sites. And here, a student has just off their own bat created a site. Anyone in the domain can create their own sites, and ask the kids in her class or in her year level who went on the Duke of Edinburgh camp if they could please just upload their photos so everyone can have a copy of everyone's photos. And they've just done that off their own bat, and it's very kind of participative approach. And I just love that no one's prompting this. No one's saying you have to go away and do this. The kids are doing it themselves, and that's what really excites me, is that it's so easy to use, that the kids are driving it and the teachers are driving it. I think that's what it's all about. So in extension from sites, we have Google+, which is sort of like a social network that's sort of an internal social network in a way. We use quite heavily communities. One of our Year 11 biology teachers absolutely loves this platform. He has a closed community with his students where he posts videos and walkthroughs, and everything that he does in class he'll record and put it on here, like assignments and pracs. And then of an afternoon, he runs a Hangout. Similar to this webinar, Google has a Hangouts app, which basically runs like a live video chat. He'll let kids dial in and talk to him after hours at sort of 4:30 doing a homework Hangout. And what he does, he answers all their top questions in there. Kids can talk directly to him. And as he answers those questions, he'll flag them with the Hangouts on Air app, and kids can then jump straight to those questions when they're doing a revision in maybe 3 to 6 months down the track. It's a really interesting tool set, and it's very new at the moment. We've only been using it for about 6 to 8 months, so how he'll go with that at exam time and things will be yet to be seen, but so far it's been very, very positive. So just in the extension of that, how some schools are approaching this is just to sort of go public with everything. And like I was saying before, that ability to be very flexible with Google Sites and have things that are out there online, giving kids the freedom to access that information whenever they'd like. This is a website you should definitely check out. This is a school in New Zealand that are doing amazing stuff with their Google Apps ecosystem. They've put almost everything online. They have weekly notices through Google Docs they embed on their websites. Every teacher has a blog, every teacher has a Google site, and it's all public. You can see all of it. The only things that they restrict on is where there's sort of student information or identifiable information. But in terms of a timetable or a notice or something like that, everything's online. So definitely check that out. It's worth having a look at. So that sort of wraps up the Google Drive component of where we're at and our rollout. And if you want a little bit more information in this presentation, there's a link there to the timeline, which I'll go into a little bit of depth in a minute, but I am understanding that I don't have too much more time to talk. So Chromebooks are sort of the next chapter for us. So we'd had Google Apps for 3.5, 4 years, and at the start of this year is when we rolled out our 750 Chromebooks at year 7 and 10. And we were the first school to really do that en masse. We had a lot of schools in our area kind of trialing them, and we trialed them as well. And one of the things we thought, this platform, this Google Apps platform has so much potential, has so much power in it. We just wanted to take a device that could leverage that. And Adam talks about the cost effectiveness of the device, and I think that is a huge player in terms of buying a cheaper device that can do 90% of what you need to do. But for us, it wasn't about the cost. We looked at every device, we investigated every platform. For us, it was about a sustainable approach. And that includes, tech support. We were spending so much money on repairing Windows laptops. and every time a Windows laptop breaks, we have to get all their data off the hard drive. We had to get everything backed up to our servers, and then bring in a new laptop and image that up. And this is extreme burden for us in the IT department. And I'm sure that money could have been better spent some way else. So when we looked at Chromebooks, we figured that this approach is fantastic because nothing's stored on the Chromebook. So they'll be able to do their work on Google Drive, to work collaboratively, do everything that we do, web research, all that sort of stuff. And then if there's any problems with the device or they break it, that's fine. We just give them one of our spares and we sort that out when we're ready to. So we can batch job that when we're ready to, rather than having to drop everything because their student's going to be without a device. They can walk back to class with their loan device and get straight back on with what they were doing. So there's little downtime. And that's really key for us. We want to have confidence in the computing. So we don't want to be, giving laptops to kids. They go into the class and then 3 kids don't have a laptop. So the lesson plan goes out the window. The next time that staff member wants to use technology, they're really thinking, well, no, I don't really want to use it anymore because last time I did it was a nightmare. And it only takes one bad experience. It's very hard to make up from that. So with the Chromebooks, they go into classes. Any problems, they come down, they grab a loan one, they're back on task within 5 minutes. So there's very little interruption whatsoever. And that's been key for us, is to say to teachers, well, every student in your class will have a working device in their hands. And it's really changed a lot. And one of the things you can see here on these graphs that might be a little bit small for you, but you get the idea. When we introduced Chromebooks at the start of the year, we just saw a meteoric rise in everything we were doing, from the amount of time people are logging into Google Apps, to the amount of email data that they're storing, to the amount of documents they're creating. Everything went through the roof. In some cases, it tripled or quadrupled in less than 3 or 4 months. So it really accelerated already that momentum that we had behind Google Apps. We were already leading the way with Google Apps, and then we got Chromebooks, and it just accelerated to a whole new level. So definitely promising signs from there. And in terms of the year, we're now in December. We've just ordered our next round of them, another 750 for our incoming Year 7s and our Year 10s. And it's been a tremendous success for us. And if you're interested in how we rolled that out, the process that we went through, I have a little timeline here on what we did to prepare for it. Initially, when I was talking about us investigating other models, we ran a trial of Chromebooks, and I think that's really pivotal. If you're going to look at Chromebooks in your school, you want to run a trial with students. We gave them to students. We used a Google form, which we set up in 10 minutes, that surveyed them every week. We just sent out the same survey, and they said, how are you feeling with it this week? What couldn't you do with it? What did it work really well with? Would you still want this device? And we did that over about a term, August through to September, and just got as much feedback as we could. While we were doing that, we thought, well, it's probably worthwhile that we make sure there's kind of a baseline understanding of Google Apps for our teaching staff. And we implemented a checklist, and that was very key in the adoption of Chromebooks as well. So the checklist was around, do you know how to share a Google document? Do you know how to use Google Drive and organize your files and do some basic tasks around Google Apps? And that helped us not only with our existing staff, but also with inducting new staff. We're a large school, so we might have 10 or 15 new staff start every year. That's 10% of our staff body. So we want to make sure those staff aren't coming in and not being equipped in the classroom to deal with all this technology. We want to make sure they have a checklist they can work through that gets them to a base standard, a basic understanding, and they have some kind of literacy around the technology, and then they can move forward from there. So once we had that checklist in there, that ran over quite a period. Over a whole term, we did once-a-week sessions where they could come in and just ask questions around the checklist, do it inside that professional development session, ask questions, get their checklist done. Once it was ticked off, it was ticked off. And look, some people did it ceremoniously and just said, yeah, and ticked it all, and that's fine. But a lot of people went in there and said, you know what, I'd never created a Google presentation before, and it was so easy, I'm definitely going to do that all the time now. And then again, they're getting all those benefits of working online. So really very promising stuff from implementing a checklist. Beyond that, I did a presentation around what a Chromebook is. People had heard they're coming, that we'd made a decision on it. I did a big presentation just explaining how fast they boot up. Within 4 seconds they're on task, how easy they are to manage, and that when we'd surveyed the staff, that 90% of them said that what they were doing was on the web anyway. They were doing web research, or they were doing doc creation in Google Drive, or they were making a Google site with their students. So all of this work was already happening on the web. And yes, it didn't do the higher-end video editing and things like that, which is possible on the devices, but it just requires a little bit of extra training. But that wasn't really a sticking point for us. We see these as a productivity device, a device that can be relied on and that can, I guess, enhance the classroom experience rather than bring it down with, slow load times and things like that. And from there, once we'd had that presentation explaining all of that, in December, we did a PD day with Mike Redding, which was fantastic. Had him out to sort of just blow people's minds a little bit and widen the horizon on Google Apps and Google Search and a whole lot of tools that people sort of weren't thinking about, and just create those conversations. And I think that's really what's been key here, is creating those conversations inside staff rooms, inside faculty, trying to get teachers to really drive this. And once you've got that culture, which we have now fantastically, they'll bring stuff to us, and the teachers have a great idea, and we'll just add fuel to that fire. We'll just, evangelize that for them and really make sure that they're driving the innovation and not the technology driving the learning. So yeah, we ran a parent-teacher night, and then it was just about distributing the devices. We did a briefing at the start of the year and then distributed them. One of the key things with Chromebooks this year that we're trying to achieve for the distribution late this year and early next year is self-service. So one of the great things with them is they're very simple. Most suppliers will offer what they call a white gloving service, and that'll allow us to not even touch the device and actually have it delivered to their homes. And if you're interested in more information on that, certainly get in contact. I have my Twitter handle down there as well, at Blake Seifert, if you're interested. So this is kind of the wrap-up of that story. I hope that made some sense in the timeline. But the key takeaways, I think, for us in terms of us having success with it have been that you need to have that accessibility there first, that infrastructure behind you. So the internet has been a big player for us. We have a 200 megabit connection at our school for 2,000 students. That's uncontested, unlimited internet, and a very robust Wi-Fi system. And I think that goes without saying for any device, whether it's PCs or Macs or Chromebooks. You've got to have that infrastructure there to support it. So that's been sort of the number one thing you've got to get right. And then once you've got that accessibility, then it's about evangelizing. It's about the training and the PD. And I like to sort of see this as a marketing exercise, as a sales exercise, because that's really what it is. I don't want to be forcing things and being prescriptive about the technology, because that often, sends people down to throw their hands up and say, well, this is what we have to do. I don't want to do it. We have to do it. But if you can get your sales right and really sell them on the benefits, talk to them about, why they'd want to use the technology, why they'd want to use Google Apps, then suddenly they're telling everyone else, and there's this great culture around change and around innovation. And then the third point is a clear direction from the top. When we have a lot of schools come out and visit us who are on this journey and want to know how they can learn from us, and the key difference that I often see is around leadership, making sure that it's not someone inside the school, an e-learning coordinator driving it, that at a staff meeting, at a briefing, whatever it is, there's something about your journey, there's something about Google Apps, or there's this change management journey. I think that's been very important in our success in having our principal class on board. Perhaps not always understanding what's going on, but definitely on board with it and supporting us as much as we can. And I think that's probably the most important factor in long-term success with it. The fourth point is a simple one: just ease the transition. Don't try and do everything at once. Slow down a little bit. Look at, okay, do I have the infrastructure in place? Do I have the training lined up? Do we have time allotted for PD for staff? Those kind of questions, getting that right first, and then looking at rolling it out, being a little systematic in your approach, which is ultimately going to lead to a better implementation long term. And creating competencies was that checklist I was talking about. That did wonders for our adoption and for just staff confidence with the technology. And the final point is a big one that really should be the first point, is around measurement. We do a lot of surveying. We do a lot of measurement of our internet and of our device connections and things like that to say, well, are these devices getting used? We want to put something in. We want to make sure we're measuring the success of it. And I think even if it's just a survey in a smaller school would be fantastic to get the perception around it. What do students think of the devices? What do they think of what they currently have? And then can you compare that in a year's time to, where you were a year ago? Just always constantly measuring anything that you do around this sort of stuff is important. So that's about the end of my spiel. If you want this presentation, I have the link right there if you're quick enough to take it down. My Twitter handle is @BlakeSeifert. I also host a technology show with Mike Redding called the UTB Show, and that basically dives into similar issues and talks like this and other applications that we use, so definitely check us out. And some of my articles around Chromebooks and around my deployment I've got hosted on Medium. You can visit that link as well. So that's about it from me. I don't know, Adam, did you want to add anything there?
No, I think that was a terrific overview, Blake. Thank you so much for sharing. And I've read a number of your Medium posts, and I think they're excellent. So I think it's a great additional resource if people want to take a look into that. And now I think we'll open it up for the remaining 10 minutes to Q&A. People would probably like to hear some follow-up thoughts. So can we open that up, please?
Sure. Well, thank you, Blake and Adam, for sharing your insights and experiences using Google tools in the school setting. We have just under 10 minutes left to get through some questions, so why don't we just dive straight into it. Blake, you did mention as one of the key takeaways professional development and training, and we do have some attendees who want to hear a little bit more about how you did that. How did you get the staff on board, and then how did you train them in these new tools? So what was the approach you used?
Sure. So it's kind of been an evolved approach. We started out using sort of the old model of professional development, which is to get up and talk to 30 people, and they all go away inspired, but very few of them actually implement. And I think that's kind of just a conundrum around IT, around PD and IT in general. And how do you get them to sort of implement what they're doing, not just get excited about it? So one of the things that we've started to do now is running sessions whereby there's videos that are self-service. I create a video on Google Forms, for instance, how to get going with Google Forms. Very simple 5-10 minute video that every step of the way lets them stop and create it as the video is being created. And I'm in the room with them in a physical room while they do this, so they can ask me questions, and I also have some students that come in and help me, because the kids get this stuff, right? The kids are all over this. They know how to do it seemingly when they're born. So they'll pick that straight up, and we just identify some great kids to come in and help us with those sessions. They watch the videos and they get that happening. Now, having said that, that's really good for something like a checklist. That's really good for something that they know exists, but you don't know what you don't know. So the other sort of approach we have as well in tandem is to provide PD at a larger level, like at a staff briefing. We'll do a 5-minute or 10-minute just quick presentation on here's something interesting, just to get those conversations started. It's really key that staff are thinking about this stuff. They're not just resting on their laurels. That the staff are always knowing that there's other stuff out there they could be doing rather than the old-fashioned way of doing it, with pen and paper or whatever they're doing at the moment. And not to say that we should replace that. I mean, like I said, McKinnon's a very traditional school, and we came from a pen and paper tradition, and that's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there's so many productivity benefits and collaboration benefits that we can see here that we really want to evangelize it as much as possible, and that's how we do it. So a two-prong approach. We have PDs with self-directed videos that I've created, and then we have a stand in front of everyone and explain a new tool or a new idea or something interesting that perhaps most people wouldn't have heard of.
Okay. Now, are the staff members required to use these tools? Do they still have freedom to choose the apps they want to use or the tools they want to use? How do you handle that whole situation?
Sure. Yeah, so I touched on earlier it being a real marketing exercise, and that's how we've approached this whole thing. And I think if you're going to be prescriptive and say you have to use it, from our experience, that doesn't work. What happens is they'll use it for the bare minimum, and they'll never go look for that extra stuff or want to improve on what they're already doing. And we want our staff to be operating at the cutting edge and to be as equipped as possible. So we really do a job in sales, and we're at this point now, which is fantastic, where if you have a bell curve, you have that sort of early adoption at the start, you have the big middle, which can go either way, and then the laggards at the end. And we've managed to capture that middle, which is fantastic. And the culture is that change is a good thing, and that we need to always be looking at new ways of doing things. And now what's happened is it's kind of pressured, in a way, peer pressured those laggards, that last 10% of our staff to kind of get on and, okay, we've got to start moving now because everyone else is doing it, I better do it. So that's sort of how we've approached it. Rather than being prescriptive, I really don't think that works. I think most schools that do that would agree that, if you can, try that sales approach. Try and sell them on the benefits. Here's clearly a way to save 20 minutes, 30 minutes out of your week. Here's a way that can totally transform what you're doing and make it a lot easier for you to provide feedback. Selling those kind of benefits.
Okay. Also, you talked about the rollout of the Chromebooks. I saw that you did have some Lenovo devices there early on, but you're rolling out more Chromebooks. Can you talk a little bit about the interaction between sort of legacy systems that you have in place, the new Chromebooks coming on board? For instance, are students allowed to take those home? And then also, what do you do with this whole BYOD theme, where maybe faculty, even students, are coming in with their own devices and wanting to use those? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We still have a Microsoft Active Directory environment, if that means anything to anyone. So we run a domain here, and we have all this, I guess some of it's legacy, but some of it's very important to our just running a school this size as well. So, all our financial stuff is run on a government system, which is steeped in Microsoft tradition. So that's sort of where we operate everything there, and we're not against that. We're about providing equity and having access to every platform. But where I guess Chromebooks interact really well is that we're starting to move things away from that local onus, that onus that requires us to be out the back, burrowing away on servers, replacing disks, fixing things with our infrastructure. We want to move away from that, whereby we provide internet, we provide wireless, and then we're helping teachers take these internet tools, these cloud tools, and transform what they're doing, because that's going to be more powerful than us replacing disks in a server in the back room, and it can have more of a direct impact into student learning and teachers, I guess, getting on board with these kind of products. So for us, it's about getting out of that backroom mentality and being more of a force for getting into the classroom. So we're trying to remove our network drives. We're currently, our Year 7s this year didn't get network home drives. So that sort of gives you an indication of how serious we are about this direction. And if staff don't want to use that technology, they don't have to. They can say, well, I still use Word, that's fine. But what we do try and do is just go back in and say, well, here are the benefits again. And one of the beauties of Google Drive is it sort of works like a network home drive in a way. They can still put Word docs on there. They can still put any FileMaker databases and things like that into Google Drive, and it'll operate as normal. So so it's just a little bit of a mind shift, and we really are trying to reduce our server infrastructure. We want to remove a whole rack out of our server room. That's one of our goals in the next 3 to 6 months, and that's going to save us money. It's going to save us time. It's going to save us a whole lot of headaches. So we're definitely looking forward to that. And in terms of BYOD, it's very popular in Australia, BYOD. I'm not sure where our audience is. Maybe a lot of them are in America, but I know in America often schools buy devices for the students and they're to stay at school. Our policy is about the freedom to innovate. So we want every student and every staff member to be able to get on and do what they want to do. We don't want to create roadblocks. We don't want to create a situation where if someone needs to do something, they have to ask our permission. That to us is the worst case, the worst possible scenario. They need to be able to go and do what they need to do and ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So we really create that freedom around the technology. We have an open Wi-Fi policy. So any student can log in with their credentials with an iPad, with a phone, with whatever they like, and use our internet. Because we believe that learning doesn't stop when you leave the classroom. Students are going to use these devices for learning. Yes, they're going to watch videos on them, and that's a price we're willing to pay. But they are going to sometimes watch an educational video. We're going to email staff while they're in lunchtime. They're going to be out in the yard after hours doing work on the internet. So we have an open policy with that. Students take these devices home. They are their device. They purchase the device. The parents purchase it. We work with suppliers. They create a portal for us. The device is purchased through that supplier, sent to their house with our information already baked into it. When those devices arrive at the school with the student on day one, it just connects to the network and goes. It's so seamless. We can hardly believe ourselves.
Well, terrific. Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid we have run out of time. So that is all we're going to be able to get through today. I know there were a lot of other questions that were out there that we did not get to, for which I apologize. And maybe you could contact Blake directly through some of the links that he provided. I do want to thank Blake Seifert and Adam Nair for their excellent presentation, and I also want to thank Google for Education for its support today. Now, we thought Blake had put some of his contact information out there, but we will also be sending out an email in a couple of days to everyone who's attended tonight, which will have a link to the recording, and you'll also be able to download the PDFs at that point. So that pretty much wraps it up for tonight, and or at least tonight in the U.S. and morning in Australia. So thank you, everybody, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.